If you are reading the scene where Kei is going on a date with Horikita, Kei mentioned that she still didn't get used to calling Ayanokoji by his family name, so she sometimes slipped and called Ayanokoji by his first name. On the contrary, ever since they broke up, Ayanokoji never called her Kei anymore. Even in his monologue, Kei had already turned into just Karizawa. This might be hurt for Kei fans, but Ayanokoji has already moved on completely from that relationship. It's not like he has a lot of attachment in the first place, so this fact just put another bitter taste in their relationship. This is just one fact that you could find when you reread the newest volume, and there are still a lot of facts that you might miss in your first read. So, let's take a look at it one by one. Let's start with Ayanokoji, because there are a lot of interesting details about Ayanokoji in this new volume. If you read the first chapter of the newest volume, Shimazaki mentioned that Ayanokoji is still saving money by trying to not buy anything unnecessary. However, this scene should have happened in early May, so Ayanokoji should have received the private points from school, which should be more than 80,000 private points. The reason why Ayanokoji is still saving money is probably because he already paid his debt to Hashimoto. Ayanokoji borrowed some money for his daily activity and paid Hashimoto right after May deposit, so he will keep tight on cash until he gets the private points for the next month. However, 80,000 is indeed a lot of points, and it's impossible for Ayanokoji to borrow that much just for his daily expenses, so he must have another expense that requires a certain amount of point. Ayanokoji has a gym membership, and while we didn't know how much it cost, going to the gym is already a routine for Ayanokoji, so he needs to save some point just for his monthly membership. Other than membership, Ayanokoji hangs out with his new classmates more than he did with his old classmates, so he also needs to prepare some points for his social interaction. However, another thing that needs to be considered is Ayanokoji's contract with Kushida. If Kushida really accepts Ayanokoji's offer, Ayanokoji will need to pay her with private points, so Ayanokoji most likely saves his private points just in case a new special exam comes. If that's really the case, it's just natural that Ayanokoji will keep tight on cash, so it's worth waiting to see how long he can keep paying for Kushida's service. Other than his economy, there is another interesting thing about Ayanokoji that I found in this new volume, which is the fact that he starts to become more honest with his feelings. He said he was jealous of Yoshida because he could fall in love with Shiraishi, and he also admitted that he might be falling in love with Hiyori in front of Hashimoto. Knowing Ayanokoji, it could be just a part of his greater scheme, but it's quite refreshing to see him finally become more honest. Ayanokoji's monologue also becomes more straightforward compared to before. He genuinely mentioned he wanted to see Hiyori and his guilt for not meeting her earlier. He is also hoping Ika and Hondo could grow and steal information from him even if it's just a little, because Ayanokoji genuinely hopes for an equal battle between the four classes. Transferring class had changed Ayanokoji a lot, and I genuinely like this version of him better. In Volume 2 of the third year arc, Horikita paid Koenji 500,000 private points for his cooperation in the exam. 500,000 is a really big number, but what Horikita needs to pay is way more than that. Back in Volume 5 second year arc, he made a contract with Koenji that she would pay 10,000 points every month as long as Koenji cooperate in that exam. And because that exam happened in September, that means Horikita already transferred a total of 80,000 points to him. If Ayanokoji spent his money on Kushida, Horikita spent her money on Koenji. Not only Koenji, Horikita also regularly invites Ibuki and Kushida for dinner, so Horikita's monthly spending is definitely higher than a normal student's even though she rarely hangs out with anyone. Horikita is currently sacrificing herself for Koenji, but I'm curious how long her money strategy will work when she already runs out of points. And while we are talking about Horikita and her dinner, there was a single scene that was quite interesting when Horikita tried to search Ayanokoji's name on the internet. She said she didn't find anything, and only got unrelated politicians and celebrities on her search engine. This is probably needless to say, but that unrelated politician is most likely Atsuomi. Even though Horikita had already met him, she still didn't know Atsuomi's name, so she must have thought his name was just an unrelated politician. This scene might not mean too much, but at least we finally know that Atsuomi is famous enough to appear on the internet search engine. At the end of the new volume, Ayanokoji was asked by Satonaka to hang out with his group on the weekend. If you don't remember about Satonaka, he was already mentioned back in the first volume as the most handsome guy in their grade. For a note, Ayanokoji only ranked 5th and Hirata ranked 2nd, while the 3rd and the 4th rank also came from former Class A. This is a very unnecessary fun fact, but 4 out of 5 of the most handsome guys in their grade are now part of Ayanokoji's class. Other than Satonaka, there are a few characters that had appeared or been mentioned in the first and second year arc, but not yet important enough to get an illustration. First there is Tomose, who was paired with Katsuragi in mental arithmetic back in the final special exam of the first year. She is cute, and has quite a big breasts, so I bet she will get an illustration sooner or later. The second one is Machida, who was in the same group as Ayanokoji and came back in the Zodiac exam. He is a former follower of Katsuragi, and is quite a bitch character, so he will most likely become a source of conflict later. As for Yoshida, he actually appears in Volume 11 as a guy who faced against Sotomura in a typing competition. Sakayanagi also mentioned something about him to Ayanokoji at the end of that volume, and that could be a reason why Ayanokoji is open about his feelings to him. Other than them, we already know the old characters such as Hashimoto and Kido. They are the only one left from Sakayanagi's group, and by some strange fate, they are not well liked in their class. Hashimoto is rumored to be a traitor, and his behavior of licking on the strong made Yoshida and Nishikawa use his name as a mockery. He used to call Sakayanagi a princess, and now he calls Ayanokoji the leader. As for Kido, he is avoided by his classmates thanks to his scary face, and since Sakayanagi left the school, I think there is no one else other than Ayanokoji who wants to talk to him. However, Hashimoto is still quite popular outside his class, proven by how he still manages to gather information about the exam. This new volume also mentioned that Hashimoto had a few romantic relationships before, and if we connect it with the scene in Volume 9 first year arc where Hashimoto receives chocolate from Chikako, we could say that Hashimoto most likely uses his charm to get information from the girls. We should be open to the possibility that Mizuno is not his only victim, and if he really is that good at manipulating romantic feelings, his advice to Ayanokoji about Hiyori suddenly has more meaning than a simple advice. It was a warning, because Hashimoto has seen it firsthand how love could make someone betray their class. When Ayanokoji asked Yoshida the reason why he liked Shiraishi, Yoshida answered that there is some mysterious part about her that made her charming. While Yoshida doesn't seem to have a really good observation, he was right about Shiraishi, because it turns out she is actually hiding her identity as an observer who was sent to ANHS to observe Ayanokoji. There are a few interesting things from Shiraishi in this new volume. For example, she calls Nishikawa by her family name, while Nishikawa calls her by her first name. It might not be really important, but it somehow disproves Shimazaki's theory about Shiraishi having a feeling for Nishikawa. Nishikawa probably has that kind of feeling, but from Shiraishi's conversation with Tsubasa, she admits that Nishikawa is just a good friend, and her special feeling is most likely just for Ayanokoji. In her meeting with Tsubasa, Shiraishi also mentioned that Sakayanagi was a bother to her, which means that Sakayanagi most likely knows about Shiraishi's real identity. That single line opened a lot of possibilities about Sakayanagi's departure, and what she is actually planning to do outside the school. If Shiraishi is the thing that Sakayanagi left behind for Ryuen, then it makes sense why she doesn't want to help Tsubasa, because she already has her own plan for Ayanokoji. As for Tsubasa, there are a few strange things from her new monologue in this new volume, but I already talk about it in this video, so feel free to check it if you want to. When Horikita was handling her work as student council president, she was only accompanied by Tsubasa. There is no trace of Kushida or the other student council member, because from what we have seen in the second volume, it seems that kind of problem only needs to be handled by the student council president and the secretary. This little scene somehow told us that student council members work separately with their own job description, and since in the previous volume we have seen Horikita work late with Tsubasa, we could say that they have a lot of work together. This student council plot didn't seem important before, but Tsubasa's monologue in this volume changed everything. She said that she is looking for the way to save Ayanokoji, and since we know she volunteered to become a student council member, it's no exaggeration to say that she probably thought Horikita was the key to her plan. However, this is just a possibility, because there is also another possibility that she wants to get close to Horikita to gain more intel about Ayanokoji. One thing for sure is, Tsubasa's closeness with Horikita is most likely the reason why Ishigami chose to confront Horikita at the end of the volume. Horikita doesn't have any tie with the political world, and she is not exactly the sharpest tool Ishigami could get, so her relationship with Ayanokoji is probably the only reason why Ishigami chose to manipulate her. For some reason, Ishigami needs Horikita to confront Tsubasa, but from their conversation in the student council room, I am curious why Ishigami chose that place to talk to Horikita despite many other places he could have chosen. The student council room is one of the limited places where students are obligated to wear a uniform to enter even on the weekend, so there is almost zero chance someone will eavesdrop on their conversation. Ishigami probably doesn't want their conversation to be heard, but if that is really the case, then there is a chance that either Ishigami or Horikita is being followed by someone. Let's take a look at the chronology for a bit. First, Ishigami sent a message to meet him at the student council room. From outsider perspective, the message itself is already strange because it is anonymous and sounds like a prank, so there is a high chance Horikita will simply abandon the message. However, when she received that message, Horikita was in Kiyaki Mall wearing her uniform, and she has a student council meeting in the afternoon, so there will be no harm for her to go there. The fact that Ishigami could know the right time to send the message tells us that he probably followed Horikita ever since she left the dorm. But since Ishigami is also wearing a uniform, he will attract more attention to himself, so he probably asked someone else to follow Horikita. If Ishigami leave the dorm right after he send that message, whoever following him will need to see where he is going. And when they find him entering the student council building, it will be too late for them to change their clothes to enter, so they wouldn't be able to hear Ishigami's conversation with Horikita. This might be just overthinking, but the previous volume proved that Tsubasa is currently investigating Ishigami, so it wouldn't be strange for her to following him in her free time. Since we didn't know how many students in school were involved with Ishigami or Tsubasa, we should always be open to the possibility that their every move will always be watched. However, let me know what you think in the comment, and see you in the next video.